Hi, I'm Katie and this is episode 68 of Ornamentations, and I have so much to share with you today. I have an FFO, I have a lot of WIP progress, as well as the return of the truly spectacular AKGIT 1833 by Modern Folk Embroidery. It's back and I have been absolutely blazing on it. And we also have the return of someone else very special, my favorite guest, my mother, and she'll be on at the end to share her stitching and recent finishes with you. So I hope you're ready for a great episode with lots of fun and fabulous projects, as well as the giveaway winner from the previous episode, and I've got that at the very end. But we'll start today with my finish. I have an FFO of Holly Jolly by Notforgotten Farms, which is my March 12 by 12. Laura, the cereal starter, and I are doing a stitch along or start along, no judgment. You don't have to actually finish these things. Of one ornament for every month. I've finished my March piece, which was Holly Jolly. It was also maybe supposed to be my February piece, but we talked about that last time. Anyways, so it's now been FFO'd as an ornament. I think it turned out absolutely amazing. I am so pleased. It is so cute. I love it. So this is stitched, just to recap, on Legacy Linen 5363 Sandcastle linen with a Soie Surfine silk conversion. That was published in the last episode, but I will put it again in the description for this episode. And then I also added, in place of just those red stitches that are supposed to surround the center, 2mm red crystal pearls. I think that's just this perfect jazzy little extra. The color is called Rouge. As you can see, it's a really great match to Christmassy, holiday, vibrant, bright reds. And I'll put a link for where you can find these in the description with the other information on this stitch. And then I added red Vierlande metallic braid for the hanger, and then just used a little bit of red silk satin left over from one of the kits for the back. So it's bright, it's cheery, it's fun, it's beautiful, and I've completed my March assignment. So I will be looking to select a piece for April. I think I've got one in mind, but we'll hear all about that in April when I actually start. So that's Holly Jolly by Notforgotten Farms, which I absolutely loved. If you're looking for a small project to maybe test out some silks on, this is really great because it's such a limited number of colors. It's also quite small. So if you don't like the experience, then you haven't lost much either in materials or in time. And I do like having a small going. It can kind of break up the big pieces. So I'm thinking I'd like to start the Little Berry Thief Strawberry by Scattered Seed Samplers for next time. So I don't know, we'll see. I looked at the chart last night. There's really not much stitching to that either. So I'd like to have some, just regular small silks conversions to share here on the channel regularly. Those will be, the different ornaments from the 12 by 12, but also just some fun small seasonal pieces. So I think I'm going to try and get a start in on Little Berry Thief. So we'll see if that happens. My plans frequently don't happen. Best of intentions, And then I also have some progress on, this is one of the late spring kits. We saw the return of this in the last episode, and that's Plum Street Samplers Chocolate Hearts. I talked about my finishing ideas for this on the last episode if you missed it, and then this is my progress. I'm getting quite close to a finish. I hope to complete the stitching before the next episode. So I have finished both the stags, and as I mentioned, I wanted to do them both in the dark brown instead of having one dark, one light. I just like the symmetrical look. It looks very balanced to me, and it's offset by the asymmetry in the top of the piece, so it isn't too symmetrical, although I actually do like fully symmetrical pieces, so I don't know. Yes, symmetry appeals to me. And then I have been working on the vase. I finished all of the grass beneath the stags, and so all that's left to do on this is to finish the vase between the stags and then the florals in the upper quadrant here, and then I will have finished. Oh, isn't it glorious? I just love it. I'm really getting wedded to the sewing box top idea, so I hope I will have a finish for you next time, although maybe not an FFO. I've got a lot going on. And then these are the threads. There are just 8 of them, and one of the great things about, so I think I said Chocolate Hearts is going to be one of the late spring, early summer kits. There are 2. The other one you haven't seen yet. That's the first of the Tiny Treasures. And the great thing about the silk palettes for both of these is that they feature a lot of colors that haven't been in previous Flosstube kits. So it's a great way to kind of build your silk stash. The red Gobelins here is actually a new color, so it hasn't been any of the kits before. And I think it's 5 of the 8 colors haven't been used in Flosstube kits before. And then the light green here has only been in 1. So it's a wonderful collection of silks, really versatile. And then the late spring kits, sorry, I got thrown by daylight savings time. Oh my gosh, definitely still adjusting, and I'm a little blah today, so forgive me, I might be repeating myself a little bit. But the late spring kits are on the way. I don't have an actual release date on those yet, but I am cutting linen. I'm putting together the thread packs. I've done the ones for the first Tiny Treasures kit. As I said, you haven't seen this project yet. I'm holding it as a surprise reveal because yeah, I love a dramatic reveal. But these are the threads for that, and I wanted to do an offering that was a small piece that was a lower investment in both your time and materials, but still produced a really great special finish. And I think you're gonna like this. I'm so satisfied. I think it has turned out absolutely beautifully. And there will be an accompanying tutorial on the finishing for the Spring Tiny Treasures kit. That'll be for everybody. It'll be public on my YouTube channel to coincide with the launch of the 2 kits, Chocolate Hearts and the as yet unrevealed Tiny Treasures kit. So stay tuned for more on that. I'll be announcing a release date when I have it, but I am working towards releasing that. Not all the materials are in yet, so I really don't know yet, but yeah. And then I also hope that I will be announcing the registration for the next running of the Elizabethan Valentine before too much longer. I'm working on getting the last pieces of the new round of kits together, so that's definitely still coming. If you are interested in taking the upcoming running of the Elizabethan Valentine, there's a notification list on my website that you can sign up for, and I'll link that in the description. And with that, so I hope we'll see a finish on Chocolate Hearts for next time. But what I've been spending a lot of my stitching time on since I saw you last has actually been Modern Folk Embroidery, AKGIT 1833, a Vierlande sampler. This is a masterpiece. I was a little worried when I put this away in November that I was really gonna get out of my groove and have trouble really getting back into it when I returned to it. But oh, those worries were definitely misplaced because I picked it up and my needle has been absolutely blazing in the 2 weeks since I saw you last. And this is where I am today. So since it's been a while since I saw this, I thought we'd just recap where I was when I left off. I should have taken a picture when I started again, but I was too excited to get going. I did not think ahead. So where was I when I left off? Fold this in half. I had to finish the top edge of this second lozenge. There wasn't a ton to do there. I added a lot of those letters. The third Tree of Life is new, as well as some of the smaller letters, and then those 2 round medallions on the bottom. That's all been done since I saw you last, and then I've started the third large lozenge. So, oh my God, does this just look spectacular or what? Yeah, I had no trouble getting back into this one. I am absolutely obsessed. It's just, you know, at this point, I'm so far. And there's obviously still an enormous amount of stitching left to go. This is an enormous piece, but I can just see it hanging on my wall, and I want it to be hanging on my wall. So I am really trying to power through here. So the last time we saw this, I was on the 4th spool of thread. I'm now really getting down into it, and oh man, I'm almost at the 75% mark here. So since I stitch full motifs, I don't just work up to page lines. I do have to kind of guess a little bit at this point where I am exactly. I would say at this point I'm somewhere on the 15th page out of 20, but by the time I see you again, I hope to definitely be past the 75% mark, because oh gosh, 75% is, I mean, that's huge. That's 3/4 of the project, but that still leaves 5 pages of intensely detailed stitching. So yeah, a few points on working this. I'm snaking my way up and down because I love the lozenges. I really like the trees of life. I found those round medallions at the bottom very repetitive. It's my least favorite thing on this piece, which for the most part I do find to be really engaging, fabulous stitching. But so I'm just snaking up and down so that I don't leave all of those medallions to the end. That would just bore me to death. And so this method spaces them out with the stitching that I find most interesting. So just to recap a few things on AKGIT, since it's been so long since we saw this, it's stitched on Legacy Linen 5363 Sicilian Marzipan, one of my favorite linens. I absolutely love it, with Soie Surfine 2099, and the equivalent 103 color is 099. So Surfine is derived from the 103 range, and the colors are the same. A 2 is just added at the start. So 2099 is just 99 and 103. Oh my God, it's amazing. It's so amazing. I don't even know what else to say about it other than to repeat myself, but I'm obsessed. I love this piece, and I really, really cannot wait. This is back, by the way. I really can't wait to have it hanging on my wall, which is actually quite unusual for me. I am very much a process stitcher, and I don't usually display my stitching. My big finishes are all wrapped up in muslin or acid-free tissue paper and stored in my closet. Seriously, not joking. The only piece I have on regular display is the Blackbird sampler that my mother stitched for me. That's just what's right over my shoulder here on the shelves behind me. It's Blackbird's Dear Daughter of Mine, and that's out all the time because of the sentimental value. It's something that my mom stitched for me. But the things I make for myself, I usually just put away, in all honesty, because for me it's really the joy of making them. But this AKGIT, ever since I first saw the pattern, I just felt this irresistible urge to have it on my wall, and I absolutely cannot wait. I've still got, as I said, quite a ways to go on this, but oh man, am I getting there or what? I am. Oh, this is fabulous. This is just so amazing. So I'm hoping for the next time I can finish off that 3rd diamond-shaped lozenge, the letters that go around it, and maybe start on the next tree of life. I won't be able to go quite as fast as I have in the last 2 weeks because yeah, I have been paying hooky from some of the other things they need to be doing, like kitting if we ever want to see the upcoming spring kits. There's linen that needs to be cut, but oh, I just fell back in love with this all over again. This is a spectacular, spectacular piece. If anybody has been admiring this but hesitated because of the size and the complexity, I really can't encourage you enough to just go for it. You don't have to smash through the entire thing in a relatively short period of time. I estimate that I will have taken a little over a year to finish this. Of course, not working continuously, but pretty steadily. But just as something that you could pick up, put down, return to, and work over a long period of time, just because the stitching is really engaging. If you like intricate stitching, this is something that just, yeah, it's brought me a lot of pleasure to stitch it. At this point, I can envision a finish so clearly that I kind of want it to just stitch itself so that I can get it hanging on my wall. But it really is just such wonderful stitching. I can't say enough about the chart. It is beautifully charted and very easy to follow, and then also it being single color does, I think, make it faster, even though the stitching is intricate, because you're not dealing with color changes all the time. You cut a length of thread and you stitch it until you're done, and then you start the next length of thread, which I actually kind of love. So AKGIT 1833, it's an absolute masterpiece. I love everything that Jacob does, but of all of them, this is the piece that really makes my heart sing, and it is just fabulous. The Britomart sampler. So, oh, my favorite of my whips. As much as I love AKGIT, this piece is just, ooh, it's it for me right now. So I have taken it off the frame for today because I have now gotten enough length that you can't see the whole thing on the frame. It may not show the shine as well. So if you didn't see the last episode, I would recommend going back and watching at least a section on the Britomart sampler, because the lighting, the frame, whatever the specific conditions were that day, they really, really showed the beauty of these materials much better than I usually can get on camera. So where are we on the Britomart sampler? I have now finished the fourth band, which, oh man, is that just popping or what? It is just alive with rich color and beautiful satin stitch and intricate design. I absolutely love this, one of my personal favorites. I love everything on this, as I said, but I think bands 4 and 5 are like the bands. These are the firecracker bands on this sampler, and then I added the border to band 4, and then I laid in the first border thread on band 5 and completed what I'm calling the internal border that frames all of the floral motifs in the center of this. So this is going to be the band on this sampler, and I cannot wait to have more progress on this to show to you. I have been revising the chart a great deal in the last couple of weeks because it's been very fascinating from a design perspective how moving the top motifs up or down just one row totally changes how you allocate the rest of the space in the band. So I've been going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, but I think I've finally made a decision. I'm ready to really get cracking on all of that now that we've got this lovely, intricate framing floral border laid in and ready to go for the main stitching on this band. So one thing I find really interesting about 17th century band samplers is that it's a very linear form, obviously, and how you use that varied a great deal in the 17th century, and it can be telling a story. And for most of the historic pieces, that's telling the story of a girl's education, as she grows and improves from stitch to stitch, band to band, learning and polishing her skill and getting better with the materials that she's been assigned. However, it can also be a design story, and that's what the Britomart sampler is designed to do, to have movement, variety, visual balance, and cohesion, but also a design progression that tells a story. So in the fourth and the fifth bands here, we're coming to the visual climax of this story before settling down to a comfortable conclusion in the sixth band and the verse. So the structure of this sampler is that there are 6 floral bands followed by verse, name, date at the bottom. So a lot of the length here is actually already in. If you think of it from dramatic terms or rather literary terms, this is Pride and Prejudice. We're setting up the story. It's lovely. It's enchanting. Jane Austen's sparkling wit. Okay, I can't compare myself to Jane Austen. That's just flawed. But anyways, it's an analogy. It's not literal. Fourth band. Lady Catherine comes and confronts Elizabeth. Fireworks ensue. Everybody realizes how they feel. Mr. Darcy shows up. He declares his love. They get engaged. Everybody's happy. Joy. Yay. More fireworks. Dramatic climax of the story. Sixth band and verse. They get married. Story wraps up. Happy conclusion, but the real bang is all happening right here. It's the structure that you see in most dramatic stories, in literature, in books, plays, the stage, but it can also be a compelling visual story too. You don't have the biggest fireworks right at the very end. You have those as the dramatic climax, and then you wind down the story. So that's the structure that I'm taking here. That may sound really weird. However, I have found that it's actually a structure consistent with what you do see on 17th century band samplers. So following that, you're also going to notice more color intensity in what I'm calling my firecracker bands. This one has so much rich pink in it, and that's really necessary to stand up to the blue, which can quite easily take over a band. It's actually quite fascinating how colors behave on Piccadilly. I know I've mentioned that before, but that's something that never gets less interesting to me. And then another really interesting story of this sampler are the borders. So I have been giving a lot of design time to the borders, trying to select them, to match them to bands, to pick out everything that fits. And so that means I've been spending a lot of time looking at 17th century pieces, specifically at their borders, how they shift and change as the sampler moves on, and what function they serve. So some band samplers are very, very uniform in their design and their execution, and some, like my own, show a shift. They're telling a visual story that's changing and evolving over the length of the band. And the borders actually play a really important role in visually signaling to the viewer that you're entering a new phase of this story. So most of them start out, like mine have, with mirrored borders that flank each band, top and bottom. So you see that on the first 3, totally consistent. And then in one group of samplers I looked at that I found very inspiring, you then see a shift in the borders for the later bands as they get more complex. The mirrored format of the borders gets tossed, and you have stronger, more dominant borders that are just on the top of each band. So I took that form, and instead of doing the wider, more stitching complex borders, I just chose a really bright, vibrant color as a clear visual demarcation. Because one thing I also learned in looking very closely at 17th century borders is that a lot of them are super deceptive time sucks. And they can also quite sneakily add a lot of length to a band sampler. I wanted to really concentrate my effort where I thought it counted, in the bands themselves. And so the borders are designed to be easy to work, not to add too much length to the sampler, and not to take up too much time. And the length aspect is really important too, because I'm going to roll mine up and store it in the Brita Mark casket, as I've said, and as was done with the original ones. But I think a lot of you will want to frame your Brita Mark samplers, and for that, I want the proportions to be visually pleasing. I do not want it to look like a CVS receipt that's hanging on your wall. So keeping the borders focused is also a good way to kind of keep the length under control and not have this just look totally crazy. Almost forgot to show the back. What was I thinking? I was so distracted with my literary analogies. Sorry, you know guys, I am who I am and I really can't help that. And I almost forgot to show you the back. And oh, I'm going to show the back every time because I am so proud of this ridiculous reversible stitching. Look at that, that's the back. Looks exactly the same as the front, which, ooh, I'm so tickled about. That you've all seen before, but back, front. Absolutely fabulous. So for next time on the Brita Mark sampler, I hope that I will be showing you some serious progress on band number 5, my stonker fireworks band. Oh, gonna be beautiful. So this one, like the 4th band, is going to feature a lot of really vibrant color. I think it's gonna be spectacular. So yeah, we'll see this again next time because the Brita Mark sampler is a real focus piece for me right now, and I can't wait to show you more on it. I don't have much haul today. I did order several charts from Market, and I will share those with you when they arrive. There were some great things. I think there are some future kits included in those, spoiler alert, Plum Street. But what did come were Susan Stanley's absolutely gorgeous first stitches dressmaking cheers, which I talked about last time, but just, oh, I can't resist showing you now that they're here because they are so utterly gorgeous and have that really satisfying cutting action. And just special shout out to the packaging. You know, Susan has such a gift for presentation. The way that she puts all of this together just, oh, enhances what's already a gorgeous, gorgeous product. So these are sold out, but she mentioned on her most recent Flosstube that she is ordering more and asked people to sign up on her interest list if they're interested. So I'll link that in the description, obviously. Highly recommend. I also purchased and watched the mini course on Martha Edlin that's being offered by Thistle Threads. It's $15. I will link it in the description. And Martha Edlin is a name that you will have heard before on my channel. If you have been a longtime viewer, I do talk about her. Martha is really, really important to those of us who study 17th century English schoolgirl embroidery because we know her name. But for a very long time, Martha Edlin has been just a name attached to an exhibition case at the Victoria and Albert. Very little was known about her, and some of what was known was correct. It turns out that they've actually had her birthday wrong all these years. So Trisha has done extensive research into Martha's life, her family, so her parents, her husband, her children, their spouses, and their lives, and has unearthed an incredible amount of information about Martha that has not been previously known. There are also there's a really deep dive into the techniques that were used on her pieces, some of what makes those interesting and exceptional. Martha was clearly very, very technically accomplished, And all of that is really interesting as well. So the course is 3 sections. The first is the biographical information about Martha Edlin and her life. The second is the technical analysis of her embroideries in the collection at Victoria and Albert. And the third is a little project that Trisha's designed to go along with it, Martha's Rose. So it is one of the really great tragedies to anyone who studies 17th century caskets. Like this one in the collection of the Met, pictured on the cover of Twixt Art and Nature, that their makers are almost always anonymous. So there are only 3 known suites, so full sets of needlework that have survived attached to a name. Martha Edlin in the collection of Victoria and Albert, Hannah Downs also in the collection of the Victoria and Albert, and the third is Elizabeth Hall, who is the subject of this year's Whitney Antiques exhibition and catalog choice in precious work. That's why this was such a big deal. There were previously 2. This was number 3. And so that's why Martha has been so important in this field, because we knew her name and we could attach it to the pieces that comprised her needlework education. And it's completely unlike the world of sampler making, where it was common practice to stitch your name, or at the very least your initials, and identify yourself on your work in a way that didn't get separated from the object. And so very often in samplers, you can research the stitcher and their life and find out all about them. Of course, it's not always possible. Sometimes the name is too common, or there are just initials, but more often than not, it does enable a great amount of really fascinating research. So a really good example of this was the recent presentation at Sampler Symposium from Vicki and Megan of Needlework Press. So because the Pierce sisters stitched their names and birth dates on their childhood samplers, that allowed Vicki and Megan to track them down and uncover the really fascinating and dramatic events of their adult lives. Information that would have been completely lost had they not stitched their names. Like what happens with caskets. They didn't do that, and so we almost never know who these girls were. And I think it's one of the just really great tragedies that the makers of, I mean, what I truly believe are some of the greatest embroidered works of all time have been lost, permanently lost to history. So that's why you should care about Martha Edlin, and that's why I watched the course. If you're interested in history, you may be interested in doing the same, and I will link all the information in the description. The last thing I have on historic context today, before we move on to my mom's appearance and her stitching, many of you mentioned in the comments on the last episode how much you appreciated the book recommendations. And I do have one more for you today. This is a little bit of a departure. It's beyond the topic of the 17th century. It doesn't have anything to do with Martha Edlin caskets or band samplers. But I think it is one of the best books on samplers that has been published, so I wanted to share it with you. Unfortunately, there's really nothing to equal this in the terms of the depth and the scope of the research that's been done on band samplers. I hope that book is coming and will be published someday, because I'd certainly like to read it. But this is a really good book, and prices are, for now, relatively reasonable on the secondary market. Not sure how long it will stay that way after I've gone and sent this on Flosstube, so act fast. But this is Imitation and Improvement, the Norfolk Sampler Tradition by Joanne Martin and Lukacher. So I am certainly very, very partial to Norfolk samplers because of the gorgeous florals that are so often the hallmark of these pieces. But the book itself is just great because of how much history, context, and research is in there. So it's not just the samplers themselves, although there is a great deal about the different schools, the visual traditions, the evolution in style, and all of that's very fascinating, but it's connected to material culture and to history, what was going on in Norfolk at the time that produced these things, their connections to the textile trades, all of the context in which these samplers came to life. And I find that absolutely fascinating. This book is exceptionally well done. It also does have a whole lot of eye candy covering the full range and scope of Norfolk samplers. So it's a beautiful book, but also one with just an incredible amount of substance. So if samplers, but not just the objects themselves, but the context of where did they come from and what was the world like in which they were made, is something that's of interest to you and you don't own this book, you probably really should. So I'll put all the information in the description, and that is my book recommendation for today. Really, truly one of the best books that has been written on samplers, and I can't recommend it highly enough. So I think I've babbled for long enough about historical context for today. Let's get on to the appearance of my mother. And I am so pleased to welcome back on the channel my mom. Meet Trisha if you haven't met her before. Hi, Mom.
Hello, I'm happy to be here.
And she is going to share some of her projects today with us.
Absolutely.
So, would you like to start there?
Yeah, well, let's see. This was something I started last summer. Finally finished my first biscornu.
Yes.
And here it is. Katie helped me pick the threads for it. And I was really happy the way it came out.
It's beautiful.
Finishing them is a little bit of a challenge, but
It turned out really well, though.
we managed.
You managed. I didn't do anything about the finishing. I just sat there and encouraged you.
Yeah, I enjoyed doing it. It did take me a while, though, to get it finished.
So this is Heartstring Samplery French Flea Market Biscornu. The version has already been published on my channel, but I will link back to it in the description if you would like to do your own. Very fabulous. Hold it up again with beautiful blue colors.
Yes,
Isn't that
these
gorgeous?
are my favorite colors, so we had to use these.
Really, really vibrant and lovely interpretation of the pattern. So that's FFO number 1,
Hey.
Heartstring Samplery. And then
Around Christmas, I did a Prairie Schooler, a gigantic Santa. He took me a while because he was so large.
And this is on lacy linen 37 count Russian tea cake with an original silk conversion done by my mom.
And we added a few little...
Do you even know what that stuff is called?
I'm not quite sure what it is.
Craft
It's
stuff
like
from the 90s.
I think it's quite that, maybe. And it makes wonderful beards, and it was fun. So I just put that for his beard and his little mustache.
And then you use fuzzy stuff for
Fuzzy
the wool trim, like
stuff
I've done on
on
my
his
Prairie Schooler
trim.
Santas
Yeah.
with beards.
It adds a layer of
Texture.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
yeah.
And then finished. She's taken up all my habits because we've got some beautiful red silk satin on the back
And
and
shared some of her stash with me.
a Vierlande metallic braid. So we'll share the silk conversion for Prairie Schooler Old St. Nick in the description for this episode.
It might be actually too big to hang on the tree, though. This may have to be displayed in a different way.
Never too big to hang on
really
your tree.
large.
You always like just stuff it on.
I do.
Okay, and then your current.
Oh, yes. Okay. So this is a pattern I bought at the attic when I was there for summer school. My first time at the attic.
Kept in her bag.
Student bag. And this was, at the time, I don't know if it still is, but at the time it was right inside the door, and I was just so gobsmacked by the the sampler that I decided I had to do something with it and bought the pattern. And so, yeah, this
Do
is...
you want to explain a little bit what you've done before I show it?
Well, you could tell the story of the linen. Maybe that will get us started.
Okay, well, so she's taken some of the motifs and arranged it into a table runner. So we were talking about ideas for what you could do to just pull out some of the motifs, and she said maybe a table runner, and I said, oh, well, that would be really convenient because I have the piece of linen already cut. She really loves Russian tea cake, as do I, and this was pre-cut in my stash, and the story...
That was perfect.
It is perfect. The story...
It's right on my coffee table. Yeah.
The story behind this is that I cut this for the Britomart sampler. I was originally convinced that Russian tea cake was the linen. I like my off-whites with a little more tonal depth to them. And a friend had been telling me, you know, Katie, 40 count Piccadilly is your linen. And I said, no, it's Russian tea cake. I was so convinced of that I cut the linen, and then I started doing my thread testing, and I was like, oh crap, it's Piccadilly. I had to call this friend up and be like, you know, does it get boring always being right? But then I had this very odd shaped cut of Russian tea cake.
Which turned out to be perfect.
It was perfect.
For the Ann Wilson motifs.
So what have you done here?
Well, so I've taken my favorite motifs off of here, and I started arranging the up here on top is going to be the friendship one. But then I needed something on the bottom. You needed a border. And I loved her colors that she used. So I took those and arranged them with Katie's help.
I didn't do very much.
Yeah, we pick out the colors. Here are my colors. And I like how it's turning out. My birds, that's the next thing I'm going to do on this. There's two little birds. Are not going to be yellow, though. I think I'm going for a blue in this shade on there. I think that'll be beautiful.
It'll be a nice highlight shade.
Yeah, so I like how it's turning out.
Yeah, so we'll share the colors for this, which is obviously not a complete conversion for Ann Wilson, in the description. But if you'd like to get started with some of these, then that'll be in the description as well. And then you are also going to tell everyone why you've enjoyed working with silk so much.
Oh, because it doesn't knot. I think that's been my biggest discover with it. Because I seem to always knot my DNC and overdyed cotton threads when I was stitching, and it rarely happens. And the other night it did happen, and I realized I think this is the first time I've had to cut out a knot in a year when I've been working with the silks, which I have really enjoyed.
They are beautiful, and also, yeah, a really pleasant stitching experience to work
there are
with.
many reasons, but that one was a revolution.
I have been tutoring her in my ways. She's using all my favorite linens and the colors and the silks.
What could I do? Yeah, so I'm really happy with how this one's turning out. So we'll see. I may have to fill in with a few more motifs. We'll see. Maybe down here.
Yeah.
Some of the smaller flowers.
I think you were going to put some of the smaller flowers like here.
That's the original
fill it
plan.
out.
So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, so you'll have to come back on the channel when you have this done and show us.
Yes, and get a
how
nice
it turned
backing
out.
fabric too, which I also haven't thought about yet, but
We'll go to Britex.
definitely.
Be good. So that is Ann Wilson, 1801 Quaker Medallion Sampler by Gentle Pursuit Designs. And, you know, so Ann Wilson is kind of a big girl of a sampler. The stitch count is 312 by 274, so pretty sizable, but all these motifs are really easy to just pull out, rearrange, do what you want. You know, Kim, Contented Needleworker Kim, has really made a thing of that, but there are just endless variations on what you can do with motifs and use them in new formats. You know,
It's been fun.
especially if you're running out of wall space, like some people I know. You can make other decorative objects for the home, like table runners.
Yeah.
Works great. And the medallion motifs and the flowers, I think, just really lend themselves to.
Yeah, but I have to admit the colors are what motivated me on that one.
Yeah.
I loved how she used the darker browns and then put in a lighter blue accent. I thought that was really pretty.
Very effective. Anything else?
No, I think that's it.
Anything else you want to say on the channel?
No, I'm happy to be here and I'm enjoying watching Katie's journey through Flosstube and the other things that she's doing.
Oh, thank you, Mom.
Yeah.
That's so sweet. So those are her most recent projects. Well, some of them, you saw her Christmas presents to me in my Christmas episodes.
True.
Which did take up a fair amount of her stitching time. She likes to remind me.
Not quite as fast as Katie.
I also spend more hours stitching than you do. You fall asleep.
True.
So that's my mom's whips. She'll be back when she has more progress to share with us on Ann Wilson and other projects. It was a pleasure to have you here on the channel, Mom.
Fun to be here.
And then we will finish up today with the the winner of the giveaway. Oh gosh. And that is the winner of the scroll frame that was announced, that the giveaway is announced.
Ooh,
in the
that's
last
a big
episode.
one.
It is. And the winner is Ann Gillum 9405. I've commented on your comment. Please contact me using the form on my website and send me your mailing address. I will get that in the mail to you. I hope you enjoy it, and frame stitching can be really just a wonderful way to work. A lot of you, I think, expressed curiosity about that in the comments. Maybe something you want to explore in the future. So that more or less brings us to the conclusion of this episode with my very special guest. And I will see you again in 2 weeks when I hope to have a finish on Chocolate Hearts, maybe a new small start as we discussed, and lots of progress on my big whips, AKGIT, and the Brutamart sampler.
Been working on a lot.
I have, and oh, am I flying on that. So I hope to continue with some really good progress. I want that on my wall. And then I'll be sharing, I hope, my picks from Market with you. So I'll see you again in 2 weeks. And until then, happy stitching.
Bye-bye.